New evidence today at the inquest into the death of anti-apartheid activist Ahmed Timol contradicted the testimony given by the last man who saw the SA Communist Party member alive. Timol died after falling from the 10th floor of the notorious John Vorster Square police station, as it was known in 1971. Judge Billy Motlez ruled that owing to contradicting accounts, including the time Timol fell to his death, forensic pathologists Dr. Stephen Naidu and Dr. Shakira Holland, as well as retired police officer João Rodrigues, will have to be recalled to have their testimonies re-examined. Earlier in the week, Rodrigues told the court that it was in the afternoon when he was left alone in the room with anti-apartheid activists. Rodrigues was the last person allegedly to see Timol alive. The retired policeman said that he saw Timol dive out of the window from the 10th floor. Meanwhile, on Thursday, Muhammad Ali Tokan said that he was certain that the incident occurred in the morning. Tokan was at a petrol station across the road from the John Vorster Square police station the morning of 27 October 1971. He explained that he remembers the day as if it was yesterday because he was on his way to Pretoria to get a trading license. Well, for a wrap of this week's testimonies at the Timol inquest, we're now joined in studio by our reporter who's been tracking this story for us, Mahlako Komane. Thanks very much for joining us, Mahlako. This story has been literally going left and right, but I guess one of the big shocks this week was the timing of the actual fall itself. I mean, it raises so many questions.
Definitely. I think it was yesterday where the businessman, Mr. Token, came in and said the judge quizzed him, are you sure you maybe were mistaken about the time? And, he really did say that I had to go to Pretoria. It was a long process. It was very important. I mean, he was an entrepreneur. He had to make money. So he said, I could not have left for Pretoria in the afternoon. So he estimated the time to be early morning, which he then calls between 9:30, anywhere between 9:30 and 11:30 on that October.
So the judge is going to have to try and figure this out. But throughout, he's been warning witnesses, hasn't he? Particularly Rodrigues.
He has. I mean, you will recall this week, before Rodrigues actually took the stand, it was Neville Else who was also held some sort of position as well in SABC at that time. They were both stationed at the John Vorster Square. Neville Else, it was a marathon of I can't recall. He doesn't know this, he doesn't know that. He could not commit to anything. I think one of the other things where the judge was also asked him was, did you hear about any torture? Did you see any torture? He said he would never torture any witness. There was never any torture. He just read about it in the media. He also heard talks. Rodrigues also coming in to also say the same. And I think they were very quick to distance themselves from the torture of Timol. Yesterday, the judge asking Rodrigues especially, and he said to him, I mean, the big question is, how did those injuries arrive on Timol's bodies? Because you'd heard the pathologists that came in and they testified one particular injury was to the eye where it was very visible. You could not miss it. And Rodrigues said he never saw that. This man... another thing that the medical experts also talked about was his ankle that was broken, and that the impact on his head was such that he was either unconscious or he was falling in and out of consciousness. You'd remember Rodrigues said that Timol, making him look like a very fit and healthy man that ran towards the window, and he was asked, but this guy was so much smaller than you, you really couldn't catch him. And I think his testimony was contradicted by the medical reports that that man was in no state to walk, let alone jump and run out of the window. And also there were specialists that came in and spoke about where his body was landed after his apparent suicide or alleged suicide, that it just landed too far away from the building for somebody that actually pushed himself. He had to have had some sort of help, some nudging. And this being corroborated by the medical reports that, I mean, you can't walk with a broken ankle, never mind sprint. Yeah. So the judge was at pains to... one almost got the sense he was saying to Rodrigues, listen, here's an opportunity for you to revise your story, because I'm hearing all this evidence and it contradicts yours. So I have to make a decision about which version is correct.
From what you saw, how credible were the witness statements of Els and Rodriguez?
I mean, with Els remembering nothing, you can't force a man to remember what he claims not to remember. But I think with Rodriguez, there were parts where he literally contradicted himself. At one point, he tripped over a chair. At one point, he just tripped and fell. So which one was it? Was there a chair? Wasn't there a chair? And I think what was very interesting was because you would remember that when Dr. Isop gave testimony a couple of weeks ago, he had said that he'd heard in Afrikaans saying they had caught a big fish. I think it was it was Els who actually caught them, and he'd said there was this big fish from the Communist Party that they had caught. So now you ask yourself, Rodriguez then is allegedly a man that was there to deliver checks. How do they then leave this man with such an important witness? So that was also another story we had to question with how was somebody that was not really qualified to be operative to be left with such an important witness, as they said. Those were some of the things I think that were basic common sense. I think when that story, I don't know if it was cooked, but whatever it is that they were doing, I think those were what they were supposed to take into account. But also Rodriguez having said that he was pressured from his superiors to add that there was a scuffle between him and Timol, of which he said he then decided not to. And the judge then asked him yesterday when it was his turn to ask him questions with him, you say you were so scared of these people, yet they were there at the first inquest in 72. They sat through it, and you openly, you were so scared of them, yet you had this courage to openly defy them. And I think the cherry on top of the cake was the commendation which you got from the commissioner, which was reserved for officers that had distinguished themselves in service. He'd never met this commissioner, never mind that he remained a sergeant for the rest of his career within the police force. You'd wonder, what was it that was so special that he had done? Yes, and he was very lax about it because he said he never saw it, and the judge was, I would be very interested to know that, you know, I have been commended in such a way by somebody so important. He was like, well, I didn't think it was important then.
All right, so today was the last day. Very briefly, what happened today? And I believe that the judge made an appeal to the public to come forward.
Yes, today we just saw Dr. Salim Asap coming in and identifying some pictures of his interrogators. Then he was able to identify a couple of those pictures. But the judge did actually make a call to the public to say that if there was anyone who had information to come forward, he will be closing on the Friday. He will be closing oral testimonies from people, but he would encourage people to come through and give whatever evidence it is, whatever they could help. You'd also remember that it's very important what the public can contribute, what people know, because Rodriguez was given up by his daughter. So I think it's very important if anybody knows anything or had seen anything. I think there's a petrol attendant as well that they're looking for who was there on that day.
All right, and it happened so long ago, so one hopes some of these people are still alive. But Mahlako, thank you very much indeed for keeping an eye on this story for us and giving us an update. That was the SABC's Mahlako Komane updating us on what has been transpiring at the second inquest of Ahmed Timol, who died in 1971.